Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. If you want to create your own happiness, then follow the advice of our guest today, Yasmin Nguyen. Yasmin, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much, Bill. Happy to be on.
Now, you've written a wonderful book, and I say that very meaningfully. It's entitled The Game of Joy. And before the show, I was telling you, I've been reading this and going through it, and even if I had a few down moments, meaning if I was glum or annoyed at something, I would look at it and it would immediately pick me up. So we want to find out a lot more about joy and a lot more from you today. But tell us originally a little bit about your backstory and how this came about.
Well, Bill, it's just so when I started writing this book, it was really the culmination of pretty much a lifetime of experiences, which certainly started when my family came over to America from Vietnam back in the late 70s, and we were one of the boat people. And growing up most of my life, it was just a matter of trying to fit in and to feel important, and did everything I was supposed to do to achieve. And so I found myself at one point in time really missing out on a lot of happiness and joy doing all the things that I was supposed to do. And so that quickly sent me on a journey that allowed me to discover and learn about joy. And just with everything that's going on in the world these days, especially after, what we've experienced in the pandemic, I just feel like joy is something that we all could use a little bit more of these days.
Now, if I'm right, and please correct me if I'm not, you were off to a successful career. You had the kind of career, I think, as a consultant or in business that we would all pretty much look at and say, gee, that's what I want to be doing. And you kind of gave it up and said, there's better things that's going to make me happier. Am I correct?
That is correct, Bill. Yes. I went down the path of making all good grades and then getting recruited to work for one of the top consulting firms and start off my career really, on the right foot, but it wasn't the right foot for me. And after a few years, I just found myself just unhappy with being in that type of environment. So I thought that I would become an entrepreneur. I thought that's where happiness was. And little did I know that it took another 3 to 5 years of just really struggling and varying degrees of success, but also a lot of disappointments and finding myself completely burnt out. And that was a turning point for me, was to really reevaluate my life and rediscover what was important. And I realized that I didn't even know what joy was at that point in time. So that was a big transition for me.
In your own definition now, is there a way you would express to us how you find joy or where joy is in your life?
That's a great question, Bill. When I set off on this journey, it was an 18-month road trip across America, and I thought I would go out there and find joy. And on the very last day of my project, this journey, I was standing there in San Diego on the pier, and I reflected back on those 18 months, and I realized that I actually didn't find joy. It's ironic because joy is not something that you actually find. Joy is something that I've realized that you create. And joy resides within us. And so it was a big eye-opener because a lot of times we hear the term finding joy or looking for joy or choosing joy, but a lot of times it's just there waiting for us, and we get to create these joyful experiences.
Now, isn't that interesting? And I want to just repeat what you just said. The joy is just there waiting for us. Is that correct? Did I repeat what you just said?
It is. That is correct. That's one of the principles of joyful living, is that joy is within all of us. And it's in many ways, it's lying there dormant, just waiting to be activated. And the ways that we do so, there's lots of different opportunities in which we can activate that joy.
And for our audience, you've mentioned that you've traveled around, and you actually went on from the business world where you found you weren't happy to setting up something called the Joyful Living Project. Can you give us an overview of what that really is? Because that could be many things. Those are general words that, we don't know. Is it a part-time gig? Is it something where is it a big building someplace in America where people go to get happy? Or what is it really?
Right. Well, the Joyful Living Project was this idea of taking some time off to travel around the country and documenting all the different experiences that I discovered that either created joy or experiences that I discovered get in the way of joy, and also how joy impacts our lives. And this was 5 years ago when I was living in Portland, Oregon, and I was meeting up with my business coach, and we were sitting there having a conversation about what the next several years looked like in my business. And all of a sudden, we just randomly had this side conversation about people living these nomadic lifestyles. And I thought, well, what if I could do that? And so within 2 months later, I packed up my car, put everything in storage, gave up my apartment, and decided to drive around the country to learn about joy. And so the Joyful Living Project was birthed out of that idea of, well, let me go on a journey and find out what joy is and document and share what I discovered.
Now, when you talk to people, did you just walk up to them almost like a reporter and say, hi, are you happy today? Are you joyful? What makes you joyful? And did they look at you kind of funny?
There were a few moments of that, but to be fully honest, I followed the breadcrumbs of relationships. I have known a lot of people around the country, and each one has introduced me to others, and many times I actually stayed at some people's houses that I didn't even know. But the joyful part of it was, one of the things I did along the way was, instead of couch surfing, which is a terminology we used to use when we would sleep on people's couches as we traveled, I did a thing called kitchen surfing, because I've always loved to cook. And so one of the ways that I wanted to return the appreciation for my hosts is to cook these elaborate 5-6 course dinners and then have them invite their friends, their neighbors over, and we would sit around the table enjoying a meal together and talk about joy.
I'm just thinking, I bet they thought there's going to be someone knocking at their door the following week saying, would you like to buy a franchise in Yasmin's Joy Company or Joy Restaurant, or open up a branch or something? And yet it was just, but what a great way, because food makes all of us happy. And obviously it must have worked, because you wouldn't keep doing it if it didn't. Was that the barrier breaker?
Absolutely. When we sit down, and the term breaking bread together, it's just a great opportunity for people to let down their guard and to be there and to share and to talk. And it was a really great way to be able to connect with people at a deeper level and to really get some meaningful insights that I wouldn't have had I just approached a stranger who might have had, their guard up and wondering, like, what is this guy trying to, get from me?
And I think you mentioned in your book, and I know we've had some of the people on the show, major universities, and I'm talking about the Ivy League now, kind of the cream of the crop. You mentioned that there's a class there taught by, I think, Linda Sardos. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
And
that is correct.
It's a class on joy and happiness, and it's the most popular class at the school, if I remember from your notes.
It is, yes. Many years ago, when Yale University launched this course on happiness, it became the most attended and registered class of all time at the university. And since the pandemic, they took the course online to make it available to a broader audience, and it has literally tripled or quadrupled in enrollment. And so it's definitely an indication of the interest, but also the need for some of the insights around this topic.
And what I thought was interesting, we actually had the second most popular teacher at Yale, Dr. Zoe Chance, and she teaches influence. But she very openly said, Linda's class had more people in it. And it's interesting, and I'm going to ask you, which comes first, joy or success? Do we have to be successful to be joyful, or vice versa?
That's such a great question, Bill. I don't know that the one comes before the other. I think they both work in tandem. And also success, it depends on how you define success. if it's monetary success, then there's a certain threshold in which you then experience joy. If you're stuck in a survival mode, it's really challenging to access joy or happiness. But many people do as well. So I think it's a combination that works in tandem. And I think Tony Robbins had talked about the science of success and the art of fulfillment. And the fulfillment piece is the happiness and the joy.
Yasmin, before we go further, I'd like to let our audience know that if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Yasmin Nguyen, and that's spelled Nguyen. His book is The Game of Joy. And Yasmin, can you tell us if there's a website where we can find out more information?
Absolutely. Joyful Living Project is where you can find out about the project and the book.
And again, the name is The Game of Joy. And if you've been feeling a little glum or maybe wondering, is this all life has for me, etc., it certainly doesn't hurt to pick it up. It's a light read. It's not going to tax you. You could read a few pages every night before bed. In fact, I use it kind of as a refresher, almost like a quick piece of candy. If I'm feeling down, I grab the book and say, let me read a few pages, and it'll bring my mind from kind of a news report that's negative or making me feel, why am I listening to this news, to something very positive and how I can make the world a little better place. As you went across the country, I'm just wondering, was there anything that you, or what things did you find out about joy that you said, wow, I'm really surprised at that, or this is really opening up a door I didn't expect?
Yes, absolutely. There were many moments where I was just really completely caught off guard when it came to joy. One of them was, as I planned my journey around the country, I originally planned it to avoid the extreme weather season. So I started the journey in the fall of 2018, and I started in Portland, Oregon, making my way south and then across and then up through the north during the summer. But I found myself in Charlotte, North Carolina one day in spring, and my next destination was going to be Washington, D.C. Now, I'd like to kind of stick with my plan because I have people I'm going to meet with. And so when I reached out to my friends and contacts in D.C., they said that they had gotten sick and they weren't going to be able to host me, and a few other things fell through. And I started to feel a little bit unjoyful and disappointed. And also I was stressing out because I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? But what was interesting and unexpected was I got on a conversation with another friend who was in Miami, Florida. And she said, hey, why don't you come down and visit us? And I thought, well, I hadn't planned on going even to Florida on this trip, but I mean, it's a 14-hour detour in the opposite direction. But, I decided, I'm just going to follow the joy. So I made that detour, drove 14 hours, ended up having dinner with my friends that night. And they said, what do you want to do here in Miami? And I said, to be honest, I didn't plan on being here, but I hear there's great Cuban food and culture. And so perhaps we could go have a meal and listen to some music. And they said, great, let's plan that. So a couple of days later, I'm at my friend's office and she says, hey, could you help me with some marketing? And I used to do some video production. And I said, well, how can I help? And so she said that she had a travel agency where she booked travel plans for people to go to Italy, Spain, and Cuba, and asked if I had some advice. And I said, hey, why don't you make some videos? And she asked me how, and I said, well, you just follow someone around with the camera and ask them some questions. And then she said, you want to go to Cuba this weekend? And I said, what? She's like, you want to go to Cuba? I'm like, really? And within 30 minutes, she hops on her computer, makes plans, and 3 days later, we're on a flight to Havana. We have the most incredible experience eating the food, listening music, exploring the countryside. And this was completely unexpected because one of the things I learned about joy is there are things that block us from joy. And when we're so attached to the way that things have to be, it holds us back from the possibilities of something even better. And so by following the joy and shifting and releasing my attachment to the plan, it created an incredible, unexpected experience that I'm just so forever grateful for.
I love hearing that because I try to take a little something from each of our guests and apply it the following week while I'm preparing the next show. I'll remember some of the things you said, and I'm one of those people, I'm too rigid. I have to follow the plan. I have to do it this way. I have to be there at a certain time. And then in the end, of course, why? The world isn't going to change if I get there at 7:05 or 7:15. And if I change my plans, it might be better for everyone. It might certainly be better for me. And hearing your story, I'm definitely going to be open to that more on a somewhat daily basis. Now, I read in your book that joyful people are more likely to have meaningful relationships. I think we're all looking for that. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. I think of joy as, in many ways, it's like a currency. Joy is like money. We exchange it for various things, for our health, for opportunities, but certainly in relationships. And you think of who are some of the most joyful people that you know, and you just want to spend time with them. See, joy is contagious. And so when you're around someone that has this joyful, optimistic, positive energy, you can't help but want to be around them. And also at the same time, you can't help but also open up and feel like it's safe to be, with them and to reveal. And when you're revealing, you're being vulnerable and you're with someone, then you develop a deeper connection. And those deeper connections just open up so many more possibilities, not only in that relationship, but also opportunities that come out of it.
That makes a lot of sense. And while you were giving that answer, I'm writing notes all over my paper here. And then I have another statement, which I'm sure all of our listeners are going to love. But you say money follows joy. Now, I would think joy in and of itself should be, that's great in itself, whatever it is. Sometimes just looking at puppies or kittens, you could, I think almost everybody can look at them for 10 or 20 minutes and just enjoy watching them flop and jump on each other and do things that, puppies and kittens do. But does it really help with the money issue?
Oh, absolutely. So I've got a couple of quick examples. You think of if you've ever been out to dinner and you've had a server who is just incredibly joyful, friendly, you typically will leave a bigger tip. So that's on one end. But on the other end as well too is there have been so many times when I've practiced joy by sending out a quick text to just friends that I haven't been in touch with, friends or even clients I haven't been in touch with, thinking of you. I call it giving out toys, the thinking of yous. And so in doing so, it creating that joy opened up a connection. And the next thing I know, they're like, hey, are you available to speak? I'd like to bring you in. My company's doing this conference, and we want to invite you in, and it generated income. So there are so many possibilities when we show up in a place of generosity, of appreciation. Those are what I call joy activators. It just opens up all of these possibilities to bring in financial gains.
I always listen to what the guest says and say to myself, is that really true? And of course, yes, because if a waiter or waitress is just a little even nicer or says to me, oh, that's a nice tie you have on, or I really like that shirt or something, if they do a reasonably good job and they're just that little extra pleasant, yeah, they are going to get a better tip. And somehow there's a connection there. And in fact, I remember years ago, I was with the boss of a company I was working for, and the waitress was so good. And the restaurant was like 2 blocks from our office. We said to her, you're very personable. If you're looking for another job in the business world, come on down the block. And I think at first she looked at us like, is this a pickup line? But we were being very real about it. Because, again, it was myself and the boss. We meant that she had the personality for our type of business, and she would have worked well in it. So I see what you mean, and it definitely, hits home. Yasmin, again, before we go further, I'd like our audience to know, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Our guest today is Yasmin Nguyen. That name Nguyen is spelled Nguyen. And his book is The Game of Joy, a really fun book to read, a book that's going to make your life better. And Yasmin, can you tell us if there's a website where we can learn more?
Absolutely, Bill. It's joyfullivingproject.com, and you can find the book as well as you can learn about the project.
And Yasmin, I'm flipping through your book, and one of the quotes I see, you say, this book will help you. And it says that this will help you create your own happiness rather than wait for things to change. I think most of us say, geez, it'd be okay if I could have a different boss or a different wife or a different husband or boyfriend or, a new neighborhood. But you're actually telling us that you're going to make that change happen, and it's going to start with us. Am I correct?
Absolutely, Bill. I think so often we're led to believe that unless circumstances change, the people, the opportunity, unless something exterior changes, then I'll be happy. But the thing is that when we approach it from that perspective, we have very little control or agency over our life experience. And by shifting and realizing that joy, again, is something that is within us, and we have the ability, as long as we know what the rules are to the concept of that joy is a game, you then take the power back. You can create joy in any moment that you choose rather than having to wait or to search or to hope for joy.
I think it's on page 23 of your book. You have a list of 5 common regrets that people have. And I've always been someone who I would rather learn from someone else's errors or mistakes or regrets and maybe eliminate them from my life and make things a little happier or more joyful. Can you tell us the most common regrets that you've come across?
Yes, Bill. Well, I actually got these regrets. I learned this from an author named Bronnie Ware, who was a nurse in Australia, and she had spent some time with people who were living their final days, and she had interviewed them and discovered that they shared with her these regrets. And so these 5 regrets are, first of all, is I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life that others expected of me. The second regret is I wish I hadn't worked so much. The third regret, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. The fourth regret is I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. And the final one, I wish I had let myself be happier.
Wow. I think that alone is worth the price of your book. And I think if we all just maybe took one a week and said, am I working too much? I think years ago I read where the Wall Street Journal did a survey, and people who missed an important event in their family's history, they couldn't tell you what it was at work that was so important, but they missed their daughter's 4th grade recital or a dance for their son in the 6th grade or a football game as a freshman or something. They knew the event, but they couldn't remember what was so important at work, and yet they had to miss that event. And of course, they regretted it years later, even though it might have been just a one-time, one-shot, and maybe it was one of those where it was mandatory that they had to be there, etc. So
absolutely, And Bill, there's one thing when it comes to regret is you can have those experiences, but if you stay stuck in regret, you're missing out on the new opportunities. It's like taking, in basketball, it's like taking a shot and missing the shot, and you're just, you're stuck on missing the shot. Well, you've got another shot coming up. So that's where when you play the game, when you're doing, playing the game of joy, if you miss something, it's okay. Get back on the horse and you've got another opportunity.
Yasmin, you say we don't find joy we created with our daily practices. Are there some daily practices you could either recommend or suggest to people that might be kind of, one of the simple things, but would either put more joy in our lives or spread the joy to some of the people around us?
Absolutely. So there's very simple things, even just going for a walk and just making a commitment to smiling at everyone that you see, regardless if they smile back at you. But the act of smiling actually activates a number of different neurochemicals, but at the same time, it creates joy. If you're exhausted, if you're feeling burnt out, you've been working many late hours, even taking the simple act of resting and giving yourself some time to just recharge, that is an act of joy. If you've got a pet, your dog or cat, just spending some quality time with them. The smell of bacon in the morning, or maybe freshly baked cookies.
Oh, I knew I liked you when you talk about bacon.
Those activate joy. So it's very simple things, but the key is to notice that joy comes in many different forms and flavors, and it doesn't have to be that elaborate vacation or whatever these big things. It's the simple experiences in our daily lives.
I think you also mentioned something called a self-care retirement day. Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah. So there was a point in time when I was so burnt out from juggling 5 different businesses. I was sleeping in my office. My health was suffering. My relationships were failing. And I was at a point where I really considered ending everything. And it was in that day that I was living in Portland, Oregon. And I needed to escape, and I hopped in my car and drove as far west as I could. And I ended up at this beautiful beach called Cannon Beach. And as I stood there and looked out at the horizon and buried my toes in the sand, it was just this magical moment of finally saying yes to myself. And I started this practice. I made a commitment to myself to return to the beach every single week, no matter what was going on. And so every Wednesday or Thursday, I'd hop in my car and I would go out there, maybe spend a few hours or so. But it became not only a ritual, but it became a practice. And I started sitting there on the beach thinking, my friends are in the office, they're in meetings. Maybe this is what it's like to retire. And so I thought, oh, wow, maybe this is my retirement day practice. It's a day in which I spend time with myself. And the analytical math part of me started crunching the numbers. And I was like, okay, so if I did this every week, that's 52 days of retirement that I've actually accumulated within a year. So what are the things that I could experience life-wise and getting clarity for my future, having these 52 extra days? And so it became this fun concept that, hey, I might not be financially in a place to retire, but I'm actually making progress towards retirement so that when I get there, I'm not wondering, well, what am I going to do next? Who am I? What are the relationships I'm going to build? So getting a head start on retirement.
You're making me want to go out. I love that thought of just going to the beach and relaxing and kind of clearing our mind, I guess, from whatever amount of time, 15 minutes, half an hour, maybe a full day, and almost like a mini vacation with ourselves. And I think that's what your book does for us. It really opens up our mind to some thoughts. And when we see that you were willing to give up a career and now you have a lifetime that you love, doing things, meeting people, creating joy, and getting your favorite activity, cooking in. Am I correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yes. And just making an impact, that feels incredibly joyful.
Yasmin, we want to thank you for being with us today. Again, I want to remind our audience, our guest has been Yasmin Nguyen, and that's spelled Nguyen, a little different than you would think from the way I'm saying it. His book is The Game of Joy, and if you're feeling a little depressed, or even if you just want to feel a little more joyful, get hold of it, read a few pages at a time, and just see what it does for your life. You have absolutely nothing to lose and a whole lot to gain. Yasmin, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Bill. What an honor and pleasure to be here with you and your audience.
I'd like our audience to know that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.